I finally managed to steal a little bit of time away from my suddenly very busy life to get you all back up to speed on what I've been doing. This year has turned out to be one of the most lively, to put it diplomatically, in recent years in my life. There's been a lot going on, and the thing is, most of it has actually been very good. It's just been a lot at once, and it's been coming very quickly. I'm not going to talk about most of that stuff because some of it is personal, and I don't really like to go into personal stuff here if I can help it. But rest assured, it's good news. It's just been keeping me hopping. The other thing that's been keeping me hopping is me attempting to release the 2 and possibly 3 new books that I have been working on over the past couple of years. So for all of this to make sense, I need to wind back a little bit. 2 years ago, I finished a book called Charisma, which I had been working on for about 12 to 18 months before then. And it was a really rocky road getting there. I had something like 7 drafts of this thing, 3 of which were partial drafts. Basically, I started a draft and then I abandoned it and wound back to the beginning and started over. So it took me a long, long time to get a finished product with this book. And when I was finished with it, I took a good long look at it and I said, you know, I'm not really sure about this one. I need to get some distance from it and figure out whether or not I actually hit everything I was aiming for with it. And at the same time, coincidentally enough, I had been hatching a new idea that I wanted to work on. So I took Charisma, I set it aside, and I started working on this new book, which was called Pavilion 7. And I finished that one last year. And I was very happy with it. And I said, well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take both of these and probably try to shepherd them both through production side by side because I've been sitting on Charisma for too long. And going back to Charisma and rereading it and thinking about it got me convinced that, yeah, I think I did as good a job as I possibly could with this idea. And I just don't want to sit on it anymore. I just want it out there. So for most of this year, I was shepherding it, both of those books through production and dealing with all of the other stuff that I've hinted at before, which was constantly interrupting. And then a couple of things happened that threw an even bigger monkey wrench into the works. And the first was the possibility of a 3rd book written very quickly. And what happened here is, again, going to require some background. See, one of the habits that I've acquired is that I don't like to write books in a series. If I come up with an idea, I want to try to find a way to compress the idea, to find the right frame for the idea that will fit elegantly into a single book, usually somewhere between 90 and 130,000 words. Because the way I think about it is I don't want to constantly be throwing a bucket down into the same well over and over again. I want to get the most out of that idea. I want to make the most succinct expression I can of the idea in one story, get it done, get it out there, and then learn what I can from the process of having done that thing and then roll that experience into the next thing, whatever it may be. So I avoided doing things in a series for that reason. I would say to myself, there's and part of it, frankly, was because I'd seen too many good ideas ruined by being stretched out, by having what could have been one good book stretched into 4 or 5 mediocre ones. So I said, that's marketing at work. That's the publishing industry at work. And I'm doing this for my own enjoyment. I'm doing this on my own terms. I might as well go by the standard that I find most palatable. And that meant doing one book and getting it done and then moving on to the next thing. So while I was working on getting Charisma and Pavilion 7 finished up, I got an idea for another book. And it was one of those things where it was like a confluence of about 4 or 5 different things that I had just sort of floating around in the back of my head that had never really come together in the form of a story. And then one day they came together in the form of a story. And I sat down and I started to write it. And I ended up writing the whole thing very quickly, like within the course of about 4 weeks. And I was very surprised by how fast it came together. And I was also very surprised by how compact it was. And a big part of this was because when I was done, I looked at it and I said, this feels like part 1 of a number of other parts. And I was a little shocked with myself. I said, I've just tricked myself, so to speak, into figuring out how to do something in a serial fashion. But at the same time, I said, well, if each installment is only going to be like between 60 and 75,000 words, which was what this one was falling in, then I could do 4 books or something like that in this series, and they would all compress into the size of basically one of my longer works. But that only started me thinking about whether or not I had just undercut myself. Maybe I had gone too economical. Maybe the thing to do would be to take this book and to try and find a way to expand it back to the size that I was comfortable with. But the more I thought about that, the more I wasn't crazy about the idea. I said, no, you are being offered a chance to conduct an experiment, the exact kind of experiment that you previously wouldn't have conducted because of the way you thought about how things worked. So maybe, just maybe, what you have here is the opportunity to tell a story in a serial fashion while at the same time respecting your own standards for what that story is going to amount to and how to pace it and how long to drag it out for and all the rest of that. And I said, you know what? I think I'm gonna try and conduct that experiment and see what happens. Now, in order to do that, I'm still going to need to go back over what I have and really give it some more polish, because having written the whole thing at great speed, I'm skeptical of how much more work it actually needs. It might not need that much more work, but I might go back over it and suddenly have an insight where I say, yes, this actually does need to be turned into a single story at full length. So it's going to take some more time to get to that point. But I have left open the door for turning this into something that could be published as a series with 3 or 4, possibly 5 installments, but I don't think it would be any more than that. And then, on top of all of this, something else happened that was actually very good. In fact, probably one of the best things that's happened to me as an independent author that I've ever had happen to me, which is that I found a new tool set. Now, up until fairly recently, my tool set basically consisted of one thing, which was the word processor, Microsoft Word. I've worked with it for decades. I've become comfortable with it, even when I'm not crazy about how it does certain things, even when I chafe at some of its limits, but it's what I'm familiar with. And for the most part, I decided that I would just work with it instead of tearing everything down and starting all over again. And I got decent results from it. But a couple of months back, a friend of mine sent me a link to a project called Typist. And the best way that I can describe Typist, for those of you who don't know anything about the general subject of things that it covers, it's almost like a programming language for documents. And the way it works is you type plain text, which then gets rendered to PDF or HTML or any number of other target formats. But you can also include code that allows you to describe how that output can be formatted, and the resulting output can be used for formatting books or scientific papers. That was the original intention for it. It was used to replace a much older program that was designed for scientific typesetting. And I tried it out. They have this web playground that you can try it out in without having to download anything, and I was blown away. And I said, I think this might solve at a very high level almost all of the production problems that I've been having. Because what I've typically done is I've written the thing in Word, and then I've used the Word document to generate a PDF, which is what's used to generate the print version of the book. And then I would go through this annoyingly complicated multi-step process to turn the Word document into an ebook. And there would be multiple steps along the way and lots of knobs that I would have to turn in order to get the results I wanted. I didn't like working with it at all. And I said, I would not do it if it weren't for the fact that ebooks constitute a significant slice of sales for me. And really, there are going to be people who want a paper book. There are going to be people who want ebooks, and I don't want to shaft either one of those segments of my audience. I know that I favor either one of those things for different reasons, so it makes sense for me to continue to support both formats. The problem was how to do it, and I just didn't like any of the tooling. So Typist comes into the picture. And one of the amazing things about Typist is that you can use the same source to generate HTML. And what's even better is that you can include code in your document to describe how certain things can be rendered in HTML versus how they can be rendered in PDF. It gets better. This code is reusable. You can reuse it across all of the documents that you're creating. So you create one basic piece of code to describe how all the documents are going to work. And with one push of the button, I'm able to take everything in my catalog and regenerate it for both PDF and EPUB in one shot. And then all I have to do is upload those files and I'm finished. I spent about a week tinkering with it, and then I spent about another week actually sitting down and writing some code in Python that would orchestrate the whole process. It turned out to be substantially easier than I thought it would be. There were the hardest things about it were figuring out how to do certain things in the EPUB format because I wasn't familiar with the nitty gritty. But once I did the homework and I started figuring out how to integrate that into what I was doing, it got a lot swifter. And so I said to myself, well, I don't want to leave this to just be what I do in the future. I'm going to start using this now. So I ended up taking yet another couple of weeks to sit down, take the books that I just written, to take Charisma and Pavilion 7, and reformat them to use this new typist-based pipeline. And this turned out to actually be a pretty smart decision because it helped me figure out all of the crazy little corner cases and eccentricities and oddities that can pop up in a manuscript and throw its formatting off, like the way smart quotes are rendered, or the way that I would be handling the computation of section breaks, things like that. I said it makes the most sense for me to use my own books as a test case. And using those two books, which had significant enough differences in their internal formatting that they made good test cases, was probably the best way to go instead of coming up with a synthetic test case. Now, I'm still going to do that. It's going to be derived from the material that I've written. But to use the books themselves as the way to test out how this works is clearly the way to keep going. Because what I'm going to continue to do is go backwards through my catalog in reverse chronological order and reformat each book to use this new typist-based system. And then at the end of it, what's going to happen is all of the master documents for every book is going to be in this new format. And this is the big part, everything that I'm going to be writing going forward is also going to continue to use Typist, because I was that impressed with the experience of sitting down and writing something using just a plain text editor and then having the results rendered, in a sidecar pane exactly the way they would look in print or exactly the way they would look as an EPUB with no intervening steps. I said, this is the way. Now, for a long time, I had been thinking about switching away from Word, but at the same time, I said to myself, I don't want to give up Word just for the sake of going to another word processor that will have another similar set of issues in a different vein. If I'm going to change my workflow, I want to solve as many of the problems that I have in the highest level possible way, and this was it. So I've spent the last several weeks wrangling all of that and writing the code to do it and figuring out how to integrate that with publishing both to Kindle and also to KDP and also to Itch. And I'm really thrilled. I'm just amazed at how good everything looks. It's just that much more aesthetically appealing than what I was doing with Word because I have more control over the layout. And it's also much more brainless because all I have to do is type my book. And the program will figure out all the formatting for me more or less automatically. The amount of work that I have to do to get the formatting to behave is an order of magnitude smaller than what it was with Word. And I'll admit it, there was a part of me that actually enjoyed doing that kind of wrangling with Word, but I was always saying to myself, if there's a better way to do this, I'm going to embrace it in 2 seconds if it comes along. Well, here it is. So my mission, now that I've accepted it, is something like this. Step 1, I get Charisma and Pavilion 7 completely finished through this new pipeline. They are both almost done. They should both be out in the next couple of months. And that's, barring any further accidents or discoveries that I have something, horrifying lurking in the wings with the formatting that's going to jam everything up. But that's the plan. Part 2 is to figure out what to do with this new book, this new quickie thing that I've written, whether it's going to be expanded or whether it's going to be turned into the first of a series. And then part 3 is to figure out what I'm going to work on next, what next big project I have in mind. One thing that I am certain is that next big project is going to be based on the Typist workflow, that I'm going to be writing the whole thing in Typist, that I'm going to be editing the whole thing in Typist, and that I'm going to be exporting the whole thing from Typist. That Word is not going to be part of this at all. Now, can I recommend this as a solution for other people to adopt? My answer to that is I honestly don't know, because I've always accepted that my case is kind of quirky. It's evolved out of this whole set of patterns that I had that were highly personalized. I don't like the idea of telling other people, you should use this. What I will tell other people is you should give this a try. And if you find that the way that it works complements the way that you like to think about how your work is put together and published and formatted and all the rest of it, then by all means go with it. And I'm willing to share detailed technical knowledge of what I've been doing with it to help you out too. But I'm not in the business of telling anybody how to do something or else. Everybody has to come to this on their own. But I will say that once I started doing this with Typist, once I started shepherding everything through it, I said to myself, man, it feels like I've come home. It really does. It feels like this is a kind of a homecoming in terms of how things are supposed to work. As much as Word got me where I needed to be for the most part, I'm going to have to say goodbye to it, and I'm happy to see what I'm going to be able to do next, because a lot of doors have been opened with this that previously weren't available to me. So that's what's been keeping me busy over the last several weeks. That's part of why I haven't been able to get in front of the camera. But things have lightened up just a little bit. There's probably going to be some more interruptions in October, but I won't talk about that here. What I will say is I'll be talking more about these 2 books when I'm closer to releasing them, and also that 3rd book when it's closer to taking final shape. And I'm finally going to be getting on track with talking about all the stuff in my backlog that I've wanted to discuss on this channel, but haven't been able to because life kept happening. So stay tuned. I've got tons more coming in both of those veins. And as always, stay curious.